across generations and across cultures. Over centuries and centuries, we've told and retold stories of strange and wonderful beasts. But are these only stories? Were the creatures once real? What happened to them? Can science tell us if these legends aren't legends at all? Can the Bible help us decide what's fact and what's fiction, what's dinosaur and dragon? In this series, we'll look to both science and the Bible to help bring dinosaurs back to life and to find the answers to the questions they have left us, uncovering the truth about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs and dragons. We know that civilizations around the world have tales of mythical creatures. But why are legends so full of monsters and dragons? Are these just ways we deal with fear and uncertainty? Are they the faces we put on the unknown? What if these stories were accounts of things our forefathers actually saw? I'm Marcus Lloyd, and today we're going to look for evidence that these were dinosaurs from a not too distant past. Even today we hear stories of strange creatures like the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. The Aboriginals of the Australian outback spoke of a T-Rex-like creature killing cattle. A Triceratops-type beast has allegedly been seen in the Congo. And from New Guinea come stories of pterosaurs, flying reptiles. All these reports have come within the last 50 years. Is it only our active imaginations? Or could these sightings be credible? Why isn't there more proof? Why can't somebody catch one of these creatures? Well, they have. In 1938, fishermen off the coast of South Africa caught a weird specimen. It's a coelacanth. Scientists thought it had gone extinct before the dinosaurs. That's because researchers discovered its fossils in rock layers far beneath dinosaur bones. The discovery of this so-called living fossil shocked the secular scientific community. Within the last few decades, there have been other finds. A beetle and a grove of pine trees among them, living remnants of species supposedly extinct for hundreds of millions of years. But creation scientists aren't surprised to find them still with us. They only had to survive a few thousand years, not millions. The idea is not a stretch if you consider that supposedly extinct specimens have been found in remote and relatively unexplored places like the ocean depths. Creation scientists have always believed that dinosaurs were created by God and lived at the same time as humans. The Bible and evidence from geology and paleontology, from biology and archaeology, and of course from history confirm this. Let's see if we can find evidence to support the biblical account. First, we'll check out some archaeological artifacts. Then we'll look into the many legends about dragon-like creatures. Finally, we'll examine the evidence from the Bible itself. Let's start in the American Southwest. Natural Bridges National Monument in Utah is a rugged landscape where water has eroded sandstone into beautiful shapes. Under the Kachina Bridge, there is unusual rock art carved by the Native Americans who lived there from around 150 BC to 1200 AD.
One of the carvings looks just like a sauropod dinosaur. Some people say that this sauropod look-alike is made of stains from water runoff. But there's no stain, there's no water runoff onto this petroglyph. And if you look closely at it, you notice the peck marks are there, not stains, it's peck marks. So the whole dinosaur look-alike is made of these peckings, and that's what makes it look genuine to us. We have a mystery here, and the mystery is, how did they make a picture of something that looks so exactly like a sauropod dinosaur? So many years before paleontology started to even uncover sauropods from the ground.
You have artwork that depicts what could be dinosaurs in many different cultures around the world that are separated by language, separated by geography, and separated by time.
On the base of a river near the border of Mexico and Guatemala, there's a carving made by Mayans somewhere between 250 AD and 900 AD, and it closely resembles a hadrosaur, more specifically a Hypacrosaurus. And not too far from there, ancient murals show figures wearing headdresses decorated with creatures like jaguars and fish, and one of the designs actually looks like a Deinonychus, one of the theropods. Artifacts like pottery and textiles from pre-Columbian culture in Peru also depict dinosaurs. These startling images are not confined to just the Americas. Let's head over to Asia.
The Hongshan is a Paleolithic culture. It's one of the first people groups to arrive in what we today call China. And they're characterized by their very elaborate carvings in valuable stone, like jade. They have jade dragons, that's sort of the icon of Hongshan culture. And in bloodstone and in turquoise, they have carvings that look, I mean, for all practical purposes, like a dinosaur.
The Hongshan sculptors have made images of jade that do look just like pigs. So when they wanted to make something look like a pig, they were quite capable of it. But when they made other creatures that look like the cousin of a triceratops, why should we doubt that someone was relating to the artist what, in his memory, a dragon, if you will, looked like?
We have a Stegosaurus look-alike in Ta Prohm. That is an ancient temple in what we call today Cambodia. But the Khmer people built this temple in the 12th century AD. And it's got carvings, bas-reliefs on columns in this stone temple of familiar animals like a water buffalo and a parrot and a monkey and a Stegosaurus. How did it get there so long before paleontology discovered the first Stegosaurus? Unless the people interacted with a live Stegosaurus. That's a possibility we should consider and not just dismiss.
There are also plenty of dragons and
yet during that time, when he was buried, brass ornamental carvings were put at his burial place, and in that carved brass, we see what look like sauropods. They have the long extended tail, they have the long thin neck and small head, and their legs are sticking down from their body, not splayed out like a lizard.
In one French castle, there's a tapestry with a swamp scene, and there's a reptile depicted in this tapestry, and it looks like a Maiasaura.
In the Middle Ages, an Italian naturalist, Ulisse Aldrovandi, included fantastic dragons in his zoological treatises. Did he just dream up these creatures? Why would he illustrate so many of them with real animals of the day? You can also find accounts of dinosaur-like beasts in the works of Marco Polo, the famous 13th century explorer. He described serpents with mouths large enough to swallow a man. Alexander the Great wrote of encountering strange monsters, and St. John of Damascus, an early Christian, spoke of a dragon 120 feet in length, killed by the Roman army. And even before that, there were Greek and Roman historians.
Winged serpents are written about by many of the old historians, the Roman historians, the Greek historians. An example of a Roman historian would be Cicero. Herodotus was writing 400 plus years before Christ.
When I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and as like as possible to the wings of a bat.
Philostratus was a Greek philosopher who lived in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, and he gave very detailed descriptions of dragons in India. And he talked about what they looked like, how big they were, their color, how they behaved. So we have lots of ancient historians describing these creatures and giving us very detailed descriptions of what these animals were like.
And there's the giant beast behemoth found in the book of Job. The Bible reads, "Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See, now his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron."
So to understand the context of what the behemoth and leviathan are, what we have to understand is that prior to their description in the book of Job, God is already describing to Job a bunch of very real animals that Job knows and is familiar with. And that pattern continues. There's no break, there's no statement where all of a sudden God says, now I'm describing mythology.
This fits the idea that Job was alive after the flood when sauropods were still alive. They've since gone extinct. But was Job looking at one when God described it? He said, "Behold now behemoth, which I made along with you," i.e. on day 6 of creation week. God made man and animals, including dinosaurs.
What can we glean from the world around us and the animals by us versus maybe something in the fossil record? Well, one of the features that God describes to Job about the behemoth is the tail. And the tail is described as something that sways like a cedar tree. Now, this is a femur bone of a small herbivorous dinosaur. And so this animal has a muscle that connects from the leg bone out to the tail. Now, dinosaurs held their tails out straight. So if we think about where this animal is, we've got the hips here, the leg moving forward and back, and the tail extending out behind it. This muscle grabs onto the tail so that every time the leg moves forward, the tail pulls in to the side of that leg. And every time the leg moves back and the other leg on the other side moves forward, it pulls the tail the opposite direction. So as a dinosaur is walking, moving its legs back and forth, the muscles of those legs are connecting to the tail, causing the tail to sway back and forth, moving gently like a tree in the wind.
There are 5 references to a Leviathan in the King James Bible, in Job, Psalms, and Isaiah. Some think the Leviathan is simply a whale, but the description in Job refers to scales, which whales don't have.
Now, right after God describes the behemoth to Job as an animal that he knows and is familiar with, he describes the Leviathan as another animal that Job has seen. And in contrast to the behemoth, which was a land-dwelling, plant-eating type of animal, he now turns to the Leviathan and says, can you draw it out with a hook?
One statement in the Bible has been a source of controversy, the claim that Leviathan breathed fire. In Job 41:19 through 21, the Bible describes the Leviathan this way. Out of his mouth go burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils, as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth.
So if this is a real creature, how could that have happened? We don't have a creature today that can breathe fire out of its mouth. That doesn't exist today, that we know of. But does that mean that it could not have existed in the past? Possibly it could have, especially if we consider some of the amazing biological devices that God has designed into all these different creatures. For example, thousands of different sea creatures and even some land creatures can produce light. And even the bombardier beetle does have this little cannon, and it shoots out steam blasts, and they're super hot and they burn its enemies.
People often ask, did dinosaurs survive the Great Flood? When God told Noah to take pairs of every animal, did that include dinosaurs?
The ark was an enormous wooden vessel. According to the Bible's description, it was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, the cubit is the distance from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger, and most scholars would say that's around 18 inches. And, if you do some quick calculations, you're looking at least 125,000 square feet of floor space.
So it's no problem with the size of the Ark, which was about the size of a World War II escort aircraft carrier, to bring the various kinds of animals that God has created on board and then to survive the flood for a year, given a high nutrition, high protein meal.
The Ark was a big floating survival box, and it was huge, very stable construction. And of course, the scripture says it had 3 decks. So if you have that volume and you have 3 decks, how much of that space would the dinosaurs have occupied?
When we think of dinosaurs, we think of how large they are. Museums like to display the largest dinosaur they can find, but the reality is dinosaurs came in different sizes. Some were very large, some were small. Of course, when God selected the dinosaur pairs to go on the ark, he would not have selected the largest ones because they would have been older than some of the same kind that were much smaller in size. The eggs that we have seen so far are about football sized. And so after hatching, these dinosaurs would get to the size of sheep, and eventually, if they lived long enough, some of them would get much larger. But the purpose of the Ark experience was to preserve the different animal kinds. So of course, taking animals that were younger and therefore smaller would have been the way to go.
Still, they had to eat. Wouldn't they attack other animals on the ark?
When I was in graduate school, I was taught that dinosaurs and grasses were separated by millions of years. And now, within the past decade or so, it's been discovered that dinosaurs ate grass, and they showed in the fossilized, the coprolites, the dung of the dinosaur. 6 different species of grasses, including something as common as rice. And so all of a sudden now we find that the rice and the other species of grasses are brought together along with the dinosaurs, and there's no separation of the alleged millions of years.
Let's take a look at what we found out so far. Archaeological evidence shows creatures that look a lot like dinosaurs. Rock carvings, paintings, and other artwork were created long before fossils were discovered. The images include details like skin and scales that have only been found in recent years. It would have been really unlikely for the ancients to know these details without having seen them in person. Also, temples, castles, and cathedrals depict dinosaur-like creatures. We have written and oral histories with accounts of dinosaur-like dragons, sea monsters, and flying serpents dating long before modern paleontology. The world's earliest historians and scholars treated these stories as fact, not folklore. We know that some of the dragon killers are real historical figures, like St. George. Early naturalists included dinosaurs and dragons in their zoological studies along with known animals. Then there are the modern-day legends, Loch Ness and the like. Rediscovery of species thought to be extinct reinforces the sightings. Last, there is evidence from the Bible. Descriptions of both Behemoth and Leviathan are similar to certain dinosaurs and marine reptiles, and we know they could have fit on the ark. But secular science insists that dinosaurs first evolved from reptiles 230 million years ago. How do you explain such radically different perspectives?
Everyone has a worldview, everyone has starting assumptions, and scientists are no different whether they're creation scientists or evolutionary scientists. And so evolutionary scientists hold to a philosophy called uniformitarianism that says that the present is the key to the past.
When it comes to matters of science, especially when we try to interpret past events, the importance of presuppositions cannot be overstated. Presuppositions are our most basic beliefs about reality, and that constrains how we interpret the data. And so when creationists and evolutionists look at the same data, the same fossils, they often draw very different conclusions about what those fossils mean because they have a different worldview, a different set of presuppositions, a different way of looking at things. As a creationist, I look at the world through the lens of Scripture. I believe the Bible is the Word of God and it's the true history of the universe. My secular colleagues, when they look at the data, they tend to have the presuppositions of naturalism and uniformitarianism.
Listen to how Peter describes it. Knowing this first, the scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. If evolution is true, death is part of the natural order through which, over millions of years, life forms evolved into more complex creatures. But the Bible tells us there was no death before Adam sinned, as Romans 5:12 tells us. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. If death existed before Adam, then death wasn't the result of sin. And if death wasn't the result of sin, then Christ's death on the cross could not have paid the penalty for sin. And if the penalty hasn't been paid, we're all lost. But if you believe God's word, if you believe that man was created in the image of God just thousands of years ago, if you believe that man's sin caused the corruption of all humankind and brought God's judgment on the earth, you'll interpret the data much differently. You'll conclude that dinosaurs that weren't on the ark died in the flood, along with every other living creature that wasn't saved on the ark. With every new discovery of a dinosaur fossil, we're gaining more understanding about these creatures. The shadows are beginning to fade, and the truth is becoming more clear. In our next episode, we'll examine the dinosaurs' fate and really look into the reasons for their extinction. Was it really an asteroid strike? Or was it some other cataclysmic event? What we find may surprise you.
So, I couldn't find my little walking ticker paper thing. measure off the arc. I apologize. So what I've got here is the fancy schmancy new Google Earth. And so you can kind of walk around a virtual deformed reality. This is my favorite. All of our parking lot lights. Look.
And our cars are melted.
All the cars are great, isn't it?
The cars are melted into
the cars are a little scary. My apologies.
What happened? It's showing the future. That's what's going to happen next week when it's 110.
Oh, heavens to Betsy, I hope not. Okay, so you were at church.
That's way better.
The cars are more visible from there than the world is right next to it.
Well, I can see my house.
It would be it's not like that. So, like, it shows pictures.
Okay, here we go. So we'll take out our handy dandy measuring tool, and I converted the arc measurements to feet. That's how I have it memorized. So we'll start at the bottom corner of the church, and we'll go 510 feet in this direction. That's how long the arc was. 10.
Wow. Wait, are cubits and feet basically the same?
No, not even close.
A cubit is like 18 inches, and a foot is 12.
Or sorry, 1.7 feet per cubit.
Foot is 12 cubits.
So it's only 300 cubits long.
So you're 0.7.
I think they're making the how large it is.
Yeah, so instead of being double, it's not 2, it's 1.7. So it goes from 300 to 510. That's your conversion. All right, so yeah, it's 510 feet long. And then it is 85 feet wide, and so that's kind of a crazy thought, really, when you consider how long it is, and it's only about 3/4 of the building's width.
Wait,
So
what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's the width of the arc.
That's it?
And
It's a giant stick.
It's a big
No, on
skinny
that,
thing.
what they show, that,
Yeah, that's what
I'm
I'm saying.
not going to argue with the Bible, but maybe they should depict it a little bit more accurately in footage and things like
this
that.
is where it got a little tricky. Trying to depict the height for you is really hard. It's about 50 feet tall, and in 3D space, the ruler doesn't work. I was kind of bummed.
So how
just to
tall is
give
it in
you a height
relation to
on
our
the ground,
church?
so you can kind of see the height on the ground. There's your height.
How high is it in relation to our church?
I wish I could show you precisely, but Google Earth doesn't really work like that.
But I mean, we know about how tall the church is when we stand outside.
Okay,
Do you know?
So I tried. I wanted it to do this, but it won't do it.
Oh.
It doesn't do it.
So is it like
So,
twice as
as
tall?
far as I know, because the church isn't the same on every corner of the church is a different height. We sit on a very, very tilted piece of land.
Okay.
We're roughly between 30 and 35 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
Each corner you measure. And so it's at least another 20 feet on top of our building.
Dang.
Or maybe 15, depending on which side
Where you're at.
looking at it. What?
Interesting.
Yeah, you could go by that. That'd be pretty darn close. Yeah. Actually, I could look that up because that's where our radio antenna is. That actually is posted on the FCC website. You could find out. If you guys go look up KQIP-LP on the FCC website. It'll tell you how tall our church is.
I'm sure everybody will promptly go and do that, Daniel.
It looks to me like at least one person is. There was 2, but I think Wade
Alright, so I just want
was
to show you
letting
guys.
Sean do it.
There's your arc. It's as long from the church building all the way to the back fence, and then it's as wide as 3/4 of the church building. So it's kind of like this room from that wall to that wall plus half the sanctuary. It's kind of like how wide the arc was. It's pretty darn long for how skinny it is. Alright, and then
It doesn't sound safe in the water.
here we go.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact page, but the FCC handles all of the stations.
Wider.
Hey.
About this range.
If it broke, then you just have 2 arcs.
And it's not.
Alright, so you guys want to
It always makes it. It's all. I mean, maybe I can see like the 3rd level. Like to me, that seems like the width of the 3rd level. That's only a 50%. So if that's it, then that makes the top one like.
whole Jurassic thing down and they bring all the dinosaurs back.
Think about my life.
Don't bring back Velociraptor. For me, anti-bringing back the Velociraptor. I don't want to get eaten by vicious chickens any more than I want to get eaten by vicious turkeys, okay? I would be
Thank you. Thank you. No!
So, just a quick word on qubits, because I had to get myself educated. Qubits changed, and they changed somewhere around the establishment of Israel. That's somewhere at the time that qubits changed. And you can actually read about it in the Bible. They say that the temple was measured by the old cubit, and the old cubit isn't mentioned how long it is in the Bible, but the short cubit is. And so we know the short cubit is actually pretty close to 18 inches, and that would make the ark much shorter. But it turns out the old cubit, we did eventually dig up. So even though it's not mentioned in the Bible how long it is, we actually found an old cubit measuring stick, and it's closer to 20.4 inches, which weirdly is exactly 1.7 feet. It's just strange to me that it could be a perfect little 1 decimal number. But anyways, yeah, so if you ever look in your Bible, it won't say that the ark is 510 feet long. It usually says it's 450 feet long, and that's because most translations were translated before we discovered how long the real cubit was. They were all translated 20, 30 years ago, or at least got their measurements from 20, 30 years ago, and we hadn't dug up the longer cubit yet, so we didn't know that the cubit used to be longer and by how much. Now we know it's a bit longer, and so the ark has grown broadly. It went from 450 to 510, so it's 60 feet longer than it used to be. All right, that is that. So, we're going to talk about what we've learned today. No one?
So we have learned
there it is.
God has a lot to say.
All right, so who wants to read the Bible verse? I have a question. Could we read the Bible verse first? Yes. Okay, don't forget your question. All right, who wants to read some Job for me? Go for it. Read me Job 41 verses 12, 15, and 18 through 21. And the reason I'm skipping around is not because it's not all good. It's because I ran out of space on the page. I couldn't fit it all. Go read it all. The whole chapter is fantastic. Oh, but go ahead. Go for it.
I know you've been out of school for about
3 weeks. Wait. Sorry, not your fault. Shh. Also, how are you reading a different translation than what I printed? Did you get like the one fluky sheet that has a different translation somehow?
She has a photographic memory, and she's reading the old King James.
Oh, she's reading the wrong verse. My bad. All right, there we go. There we go. Okay, go for it. Try one more time.
Oh.
Emphasize.
Leviathans.
Leviathans.
Limbs and its
enormous
strength and graceful form. The scales on its back are like rows of shields, tightly
sealed
together.
When it sneezes,
it flashes light. Its eyes are like a red of dawn. Lightning leaps from its mouth. Flames of fire flashes out. Smoke streams from its nostrils like a stream of a pot heated and overburning brushes. It breathes. Its breath would candle coals for flames shoot from its mouth. Job 41, 12, 15, 18, 21.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Who would like to read 2 Peter 3 through 4? Go for it.
Most importantly, I want to remind you that in the last days, scoffers will come, mocking the truth and following their own desires. They will say, what happened to the promise that Jesus is coming again? From before the times of our ancestors, everything has remained the same since the world was first created. 2 Peter 3:3-4.
Okay. And who wants to read Romans 5:12? Johnny, read us Romans 5:12.
Yes! When Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone. For everyone sinned. Romans 5:12.
I love the fairness. Thank you. Thank you. I love the fairness of that verse, because it puts on Adam what should be put on Adam, but then it reminds you, you did it. You did it too. You did it too. Okay. I've always enjoyed that it doesn't just say one or it doesn't just say the other. Like it's all in there. All right. A question from Simon before we go through it with some questions from the sheet.
I didn't know Tigger existed.
I didn't know Tigger existed. Is there a typo?
Tigger? No, Tigger.
Oh, you're looking at the picture. You think that looks like Tigger?
Yeah, because he's jumping on his tail.
Well, that's a good point, but his tail doesn't have stripes, and that is what makes the Tigger Tigger.
That's why they put the trapeze.
Yep.
And it's curly.
Man, if you found that cave and Sharpied it, people would be so mad. So mad. You just draw it, and then you write Tigger with an arrow. Oh man. Alright, so
We're going to southern Utah this summer.
I did some Google searching, and I actually found one that wasn't in the video. If you guys look on your sheets, there's the 3 pictures there, and this one was in the video, the top one, the middle one was in the video, the Stegosaurus, and the bottom one was not. And I think this is really cool. This is actually a mosaic. It's one little, you're zoomed in. The mosaic is bigger than a human. It's this tall. It's from here to here. But the portion on the sheet is only this little upper corner portion, and it was dug up in Pompeii. You guys have all done your history classes. You know the story of Pompeii. So Pompeii was lost for a long, long period of time. This isn't the kind of thing you could sneak into the city and make, and then quick, bury it with a bunch of ash again. That's not how it works. So they actually dug this up, and amongst all the other things in the picture of life in Pompeii, there's also this. And it's a bunch of hunters about to sneak up on a dinosaur. Isn't that cool?
And they had clothing and shields, so they obviously knew how to make it.
Yeah, this isn't cavemen drawings or something. This is
this isn't a guy.
and we know what period Pompeii is from. You know what I mean? This isn't some mysterious civilization no one knows anything about. We actually know about Pompeii. So it's just kind of cool. In Pompeii, picture some hunters going after a dinosaur. Pretty sweet.
Can you show me where the dinosaur is?
It is right here.
It's above the 300.
I thought that was a duck.
Now, if it's to scale, Ezra, if it's to scale, that would be the largest duck in creation.
That's really far away.
Things getting smaller. Now, if they're that good an artist and everything is actually to scale, then it's even bigger than it looks. Because it is behind them in the distance. It's a sure, whatever.
You know what? I give up.
I just give up.
Exactly.
You know how to deal with it. You explain it to him later. All right. So, first question.
It was fishing, like you said.
Yeah, I thought it was just
Can someone tell me what a living fossil is? And then can you give me one of the examples? Because there was 3 or 4 of them in the video tonight. So what is a living fossil? And then give us at least one example of a living fossil. Yeah.
Looks like a dinosaur that they find is still alive, and the soliphants.
Coelacanth. Good try. It's always good that you try. Don't ever be like, that one fish I can't say. Just try it. It's always worth it. It's good. Coelacanth. All right, very nice. So yeah, it's something we thought was extinct, and we find it not just around you find its bones unfossilized. You actually find it alive. You find it still living. That's really important.
So it's living in a fossil.
It's like we thought you could only find them as fossils, and then it turns out they're still alive. So coelacanth, they thought, was a prehistoric fish that died out before the dinosaurs even evolved. That was their theory, that it died out before the dinosaurs even evolved. It was older than dinosaurs, and then it turns out they still exist. They're still alive today. And this is the crazy thing. You compare the fossil of the coelacanth to the coelacanth we have today, and there's no difference.
But they mutated the
But they predated the dinosaurs.
They cheated evolution.
Basically.
Wow.
But they're not alone. Does anybody else remember another living fossil? Just a few other examples? Yeah.
A living fossil would count as weight.
Thank you for doing that because my arm got tired.
Simon. The tree. You want to give us an example here? Like which tree? That one? That particular tree? You guys remember what tree in the video was a living fossil example?
Is it because you stopped and told us? Because I don't think the video told
No,
us.
not that one.
Because I remember what you
That's
said.
totally not the same thing.
I remember what that is.
Nope,
Just say it.
not the
I
same one.
learned new
It was a certain kind of pine tree.
A cedar tree.
No.
It was a tree.
No one remembers?
No, it was
That was, okay, if you're answering what kind of tree, put your hand up. If you're not answering what kind of tree, put your hand down so I know who I'm actually calling on and why. Yes.
Wait, was this the palm tree with the beetle?
Nope. Alright, yes?
It's the tree.
No, that's not a kind of.
It's a tree.
The Christmas.
Yeah?
Chris, what?
I don't even know why. Gio, you remember?
But all I know is, hey, oak tree.
No, she said that one.
No, I just talk about the how humongous. Do you know how tall is a humongous tree back day?
I don't know.
In Chico.
In Chico, we have a tall tree?
But you can't find it because they just
They have to cut it down?
yeah, because it's humongous.
It's probably getting to be dangerous.
Yeah,
That's a bummer.
it's around 1,000 years old.
Oh my gosh. It's insanely old.
So you say that till it falls on
Alright, I'm trying to remember it now and you guys have got me to forget it.
Oh, I know.
Do you remember it? Does anyone have any other examples of a living fossil besides the lone something pine tree that I can't remember? Yes?
Loch Ness monster.
Oh, okay. But we would actually have to like catch it alive for that to like qualify.
Is it
But
Dinosaur?
it's a good try. Yes. Troll. Say it again.
Trilobite.
Trilobite. Yeah. What?
I have a really good one.
It's one of the creatures we find in the deepest fossil layers of all, and so we just kind of assume, yeah, they're totally died out. And then it turns out they actually live in great numbers still. Yeah. Trilobite. Yeah. That's kind of like a movie thing.
Isn't that real?
There are mosquitoes in everywhere, but like I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
No, like
I haven't really researched that enough to make a comment.
It's a giant mosquito.
It's a living fossil, isn't it?
And then they caught it in amber, and then they opened the amber and
It was a lie.
Did you watch Sharknado again?
That's the dream he had last night. I knew it. Okay. Alright. Name me an interesting artifact or a story that includes a dragon or a dinosaur-like creature. Ooh. You guys can take it from the video, or if you just happen to know one off the top of your head, you can give me one of those. Yes.
The one in this picture.
Oh, well, okay, so we're...
The third picture.
No, you're kind of right.
The duck.
So, yeah, okay, that is an artifact. I guess that qualifies. Yeah, so this is from Cambodia. This little center picture of the Stegosaurus. It was made by the Khmer people, which now live in. Wait, is it still Cambodia? Yeah, it's still Cambodia. Yeah, it's still Cambodia. Who are? Well, there's a huge purge, but they still live. They're still there.
Oh, they're still alive? Yeah. Another living fossil.
I can't win tonight. I can't win tonight. All right, Andrew.
Go, Eric.
Yeah. Yes.
All of the Asian pottery.
Oh yeah. So Asian pottery has a bajillion different examples of dragons on it, and people have always basically thought, okay, this is automatically fake. This is automatically made up. But truth be told, if the animals were dying out, they could have become legend very quickly after there wasn't a lot of them left, or after there was none of them left. But they'd have to get their start somewhere. And if you go into the oldest traditions in Chinese pottery or jade carving, they look more and more like the real thing.
Right.
So the further back in time you go, the more like a dinosaur they look, and the further towards now you go, the more stylized and 10-foot whiskers and all that stuff gets added. Don't have limbs, like that stuff gets added on later.
And then I have another super cool one.
Yeah.
Just because like there's a personal attachment to it.
Sure.
My like super hippie left liberal school that I love, that I work at, that I get to be in a mission field every day. I painted one of my most beautiful pictures of St. George and the Dragon.
Nice.
Because in 2nd grade and 3rd grade at our Harvest Festival, we depict that every year. But the most, no joke, but the most amazing thing, no, it's super rad. That's what I'm saying, like my full-on left, weird, hippie, liberal, like school does this amazing biblical, like
That's really
it's
odd.
super rad, right?
But
I
that's
mean,
really
like
cool.
it's super, super, super rad. So every year, in their own celebration,
They actually
they
bring up
do
this
this
cool guy.
yeah, it's awesome.
Okay.
That's too strange.
Yeah, it's weird.
All right, Alex.
I have actually 3 of them.
Oh my gosh. Give me
Bible.
What?
Bible.
Can you be specific?
Behemoth, it was in Job. Leviathan, it was in Job.
Leviathan or whatever.
Leviathan.
Yeah, Job.
And the second one is Dinosaur Train. The third one is
Oh, dinosaur!
Jurassic Park. Yeah,
Dinosaur Train.
That's so accurate.
Is it weird if I cry? Is it weird?
No.
Alright. Yes!
Okay, 2. Okay, remember Camelot and the sword? But I can't hear you hard enough.
Camelot?
And he was like, woo!
Where's the dinosaur in that story?
He was like that was his pet.
Wait, what?
Okay, right. But the one with Mary in Scotland.
What?
And then
Mary in Scotland.
And then there was a dragon like roar.
Like roar?
Fire, man.
Like roar.
I feel like the question was misunderstood. Alright. Alright, so here's a real brain scratcher, okay? Can you guys think of something that fits the description of behemoth other than a dinosaur? And you can just say no. No's an acceptable answer. You gotta think of some other animal that fits the description of behemoth. Now, not Leviathan. Don't forget, there's 2 dinosaur-like creatures in Job. Leviathan is the one that swims. Leviathan is the one that has scaly armor. Leviathan is the one that eats meat and has tons and tons of sharp teeth. We're talking about behemoth. Behemoth is the one that's crazy tall. Behemoth is a land animal. Behemoth has, this is a tricky part, a tail like a cedar tree. Neither of those have a tail bigger than my arm.
A long-tailed giraffe. A long-tailed giraffe.
A giraffe with the neck of
But
a
the
giraffe.
girth.
For a tail.
Would still be small.
Alright. Yeah.
Not, you know.
Komodo dragon!
I was gonna say that.
Alright! How tall is the Komodo dragon?
It's like this tall.
Go look up Job 40. Tell me what's wrong with the Komodo dragon. Grab a Bible.
Go ahead. I got one.
Alright.
That's a good.
Yes.
I was going to say an elephant walking backwards.
Oh my god.
Okay.
That is actually
I'll
super
take that.
funny.
Alright. Yeah, because in Job's day they were so dumb they didn't know which was the front or which was the back on the
You know,
elephant.
he was very feverish. It's hallucinating
Job was
when
a
you're
sick man,
He was
right?
very, very ill. We have to
He'd
give
gone
him
through
praise.
some stuff.
Take that
But
back.
God was the one who
All right.
said it.
Any real answers here? I have a real. Okay. Is there any real answers? I don't even know anymore.
It's peace dragons.
It's melting down.
It's furry.
No, go ahead, read through.
It's grass.
If you guys read through Job 40, I think you'll see there are too many details mentioned to allow it to be any other thing that dwells on land besides a dinosaur. Too many details. Most things we can think of, like elephants and giraffes and those kinds of things, where their legs seem like beams of brass, where their ribs seem like they're made out of iron, they're so sturdy and strong, would be discounted by the fact that it has to have a tail like that of a cedar. Suddenly it's like, well, can't be a giraffe, can't be an elephant, can't be a rhino, can't be any of those things, because they all have these little teeny tiny tails. I mean, in comparison to a cedar. There's no comparison. You could say a lot about an elephant, that it's sturdy, that it has those big sturdy legs and all that stuff, but it doesn't do what
the verses actually say. Yeah.
It could be a bronze statue that has one of those movable tails.
I'm sure that's what God was talking about when he said, I created it on the same day as you in creation. Right after he made Adam, he's like, ooh, I got an idea for a statue. Some kinetic sculpture art. All right. So this is a much more difficult question. You kind of have to give an opinion. There isn't really a right answer, wrong answer here. But try not to make a joke out of this, because I really don't want to insult anyone. And you guys have to realize, when you're at church, there's never a guarantee that like everyone in the room believes everything you believe. There's never a guarantee that everyone in the room looks at the Bible and looks at God the same way you do. And so just be careful when I ask a question like question 4, about to ask it. You don't make too much fun as you give your answer, because you don't really know. Someone could be here who totally doesn't believe anything we're talking about as far as like dinosaurs and how they fit in with the Bible. And if you make too much fun of a question like this, you could really hurt their feelings. So I just want you guys to try and be sensitive. It also gets you into good practice for how we're actually supposed to talk to people who don't believe in God. We're not supposed to belittle people. We're not supposed to make fun of them. We're not supposed to treat them like they're somehow inferior or lesser. Those are all wrong attitudes. God hates those attitudes. He wants us to treat people with love. And that includes when they don't believe the same thing as you. That includes when they disagree with you. That includes if they want to debate you and fight you about this stuff. You're supposed to treat them with love and not get into a fight. Not get into that kind of debate. Just answer in love whatever the truth is in that situation. So here's your question, and try and answer it as unoffensively as possible. With all this historical evidence that humans encountered dinosaurs, why do you think secular scientists, that means scientists who do not believe in God, they won't consider the possibility that humans coexisted with dinosaurs? Why do you think that is? Johnny?
I think it's because they, like the video said, they go into it when they see like a fossil that kind of maybe disproves evolution or something like that. They go into it thinking that they already think that evolution exists, and in their mind that's a fact, and that's not going to be swayed. So even looking for fossils, that really doesn't matter. They're just looking for stuff that's going to like benefit themselves and like make themselves look like they're right. And so they're not looking for the truth. They're just looking for what'll prove themselves right.
Validation.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, more answers. Yeah.
It doesn't allow enough time for like evolution between humans and dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Instead of the million-year time span allowing for evolution, you've got no time span.
Yeah, suddenly everything kind of has to start existing all at the same time.
Gotta start speeding up the changing process. And
Yeah.
like, switch.
So it cramps their evolutionary style. Okay. Andrew?
They put too much stock into carbon dating.
Too much stock into carbon dating? Other radiometric dating systems, for sure. Yeah, Autumn.
I think that it would make them question possibly their own, not just presuppositions, but like, this is what I've been taught. Was I stupid to believe this?
Just the human nature of admitting you're wrong.
Right, and question their own intelligence, because I'm sure that they really, if they're out digging up fossils, I mean, it's not your average Joe that goes out and does that.
For sure.
Unless you've paid for the experience. So,
Yeah, okay.
realistically, I mean,
No,
it
it's a
would
good
make
point.
them
I
have
mean,
to
you
like
have to go
have
to
to
school
just
for a
question
lot
what
of
they
years.
know.
It's a lot of years of school you'd be going back on. Yeah.
This is about the behemoth.
Oh, okay. You looked it up in Job 40.
Yeah.
Nice.
It says it eats grass like an ox, so it can't be a Komodo dragon. But it also says that it can hide in the reeds, and reeds aren't that tall.
That's a really interesting
Is it
point.
a lion?
So reeds grow in swamps, yeah?
Yeah, it also says stuff about swamps, but Komodo dragons don't live in swamps.
So this is an interesting fact. When you look at the super duper tall dinosaurs, most of them don't hold their neck like this. Some of them do. Some of them. But most of them don't. In fact, some of the biggest ones, the longest ones, they actually hold their neck like this because they're eating grass, right? So they don't actually want their head way the heck up here. That's like really obnoxious to go down and get grass. So what we had in our quiz picture is the most likely candidate, and that's what they brought back from the dead, the Brontosaurus. The thing they told us for a long time. Oh, we're sorry, we forgot, it doesn't exist. I don't know if you guys followed the Brontosaurus. It was like my favorite dinosaur growing up, and then one year they just declared Pluto style. It ain't real, it doesn't exist. Not, well, I guess Pluto was declassified. Brontosaurus was kind of declassified. They said, oh, we're sorry, all Brontosauruses are Brachiosauruses.
There we go.
They're all the same thing. So they kind of like deranked it from having its own classification. And then a few years later, like, I don't know, 7 or 10 years somewhere in there, they're like, oh, by the way, Brontosaurus still totally exists. We were completely wrong. It's totally different from a Brachiosaurus. And I'm just like, yes! That's right! So it turns out Brachiosaurus is this guy. Brontosaurus is... Do I have that backwards now?
How do you like Brontosaurus?
I'm not sure if I have it backwards now, but anyways, yeah, he keeps his head straight out. And so this is the interesting thing. He's only as tall as his shoulder. That's how tall he is. His shoulder's still pretty tall, but like you could actually lie down in the reeds and totally just disappear if you're him. I mean, if you're trying to be climate controlled, you sit in the sun to get warm, you lie down in the reeds in the water to get cool.
It also says that the lotus plant gives it shade. Do you know how tall lotus?
What?
Lotus plant gives it shade. Now I have to reread the chapter.
That's bizarre.
That's crazy.
Because lotuses
There's-
are little.
Those are Asian.
And they're not even in that vicinity.
Right.
Which makes me wonder if that's a mistranslation.
Well,
I'll look it up.
there's another.
Alright, here's the full sentence. The lotus plants give it shade among the willows beside the stream.
Among the willows. Well, willows are full-blown trees.
Yeah.
So
that's
maybe it
tree.
was laying down
Lotus
the
is
river.
growing on top of the willow.
Sure.
Yeah, it was just
I'm going to have to research that. I'll try and be prepared for next week. Thank you for reading. Always good to double-check your Bible
might
verses.
be a specifically isolated incident in which he's pointing something out in a specific case of like.
The way he talks at the beginning of the chapter sounds like he's literally looking at what God is describing.
Yeah.
So there could be specific
So he's trying to
instances.
describe like a
It
scenario.
also would seem strange if God was using hyper-specific things that aren't generally true to prove a point, because usually you lean on the general when you're proving a point, not the specific. But I don't know. I digress. All right, anybody else have a good answer for secular scientist question, why they might ignore some evidence that leans in the direction of dinosaurs and humans coexisted? Yeah.
Like at school, they just pound it into, like, if you ask a question, they'll back it up with proof. Like, I asked my teacher, she's like, oh yeah, we found this evolutionary link for this horse and how it evolved. I said, did they actually find fossils? And she said, oh yeah, they actually found the fossils. That's how we know it's true.
Okay. And then, what of it?
I went home and asked my dad, he's like, it was probably just a different species.
It's very likely. The other thing too is that I don't think we can really rule out speciation. Speciation is where you have enough breeding along a certain direction to where you get something that looks completely and utterly different. So for instance, in science, we basically classified all domesticated dogs as the same species. And that's really weird if you consider how crazy different breeds of dogs are. But we've said technically we're going to call them all the exact same species. So then it gets weird, in my mind at least, if you take and you breed horses or you breed wolves or they just breed naturally in the wild until they look utterly different from their long-lost cousin from another side of the continent. And yet we'll say those are different species. And they still share the same kind of alleles in their DNA that different breeds of dogs do. But for dogs, we're calling it all the same species. And the justification is that we help the dogs to look different, and in the wild, animals are just doing this all of their own accord. And so just the fact that it happens in the wild means it's a new species, and if we help it along, then it's a breed. It's not a species. But that's really semantics. That's just wordplay. That's just choosing what we want to call things. And so yeah, if a horse looks a crazy bunch different from another horse, that's not a good test that it is evolution. A good test would be checking the DNA. A good test would be actually being able to document how it got that way. What was the breeding required to get this to happen? And if we don't know that, it might be too soon to make a call like, this is evolution at work. Because we don't actually have all the facts gathered yet. All right, let's go ahead and move to our next question. We could basically sit on any particular question forever. We got 5 minutes left.
It's mutated.
It's mutated, okay, good. Does anybody remember what uniformitarianism is?
Yes!
Can anybody rhyme me like a little song about uniformitarianism in the next 5 seconds? All right, 5 seconds are up. All right, what is uniformitarianism? Yes.
Uniformitarianism is a belief that Earth's past geological changes can be fully explained by processes taking place now.
Taking place now. And more than geological, other things as well. Great explanation. But it extends past that. It goes all the way into the stars. It happens within species. It's the idea that everything is happening at the same rate and in the same way now as it was in the past. And so if you just take what's happening now, map it out for 5 years, and then play it backwards and increase the math, you should be able to see into the past. The problem is that doesn't even work with the history we know for a fact. If you look at population dynamics, you can't accurately map out how the population has gone during the known past with any fraction of that data shown to you. So if you take the past 10 years of population growth on the planet, that's not enough to predict the past 200 years. It's not enough. You can't do it. You'll fail. If you take the past 20 years, it's not enough. If you take the past, you can go all the way out to 100 years, take the past 100 years of population data, you still won't get the 100 years behind that predicted properly. That's weird. Because too many things happen that you're not taking account of. When you look at population dynamics, you don't know when a disease occurred. If a disease occurred 20 years ago, that affects the population way different than if the disease occurred 30 years ago. Than if the disease occurred 40 years ago. Than if the disease occurred 50 years ago. Because where in the growth the outbreak is where it plateaus and the growth takes off from there. But if you have a plateau further along, you pick up faster. You start growing quicker after the disease is over with. But if it's earlier, it slows you down a lot worse. And so you can't accurately foretell the past from the now. We've been able to show that in all different places of science that we've actually been logging for long periods of time. And yet this is still a prevailing theory on everything. That the universe follows this, that the earth follows this, that species follow this. The idea is essentially that if you can look at stuff for a few years, you can predict how it's always been. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And this is the same understanding that goes into the fossil layers. If you guys have ever looked at those different geologic columns in your textbook and they just do colored crayon colors, it's totally inaccurate. If you go out and look at the dirt, it's all dirt colored. It's not orange at this layer and purple at this layer and blue at this layer and green at this layer. There are places where there's some cool colors, don't get me wrong. Some vibrant oranges and some close to purples. But it's not that drastic. The point is this though. In all of these layers of geologic column, do you know what's missing at every stage? The micro layers we do see in present day soil deposits. If you dig into our topsoil now, you can actually see soil deposits based on recent events. Oh, there used to be an orchard here. You'll see orchard root deep. This soil exists. You go deeper than that and you'll see, oh, well, this used to be a bog, and now you'll see the deposits that were left over from the bog, and you go deeper than that. And you see these layers that are generally quite thick, and they have to do with very tiny portions of history. And then you get into the fossil column and they say, oh yeah, that layer, that's millions of years.
Aren't they like this long?
That's essentially the assertion, that every year's layer of soil is so thin now, you can't see it. You just have to pretend it's there.
It's cheating.
Basically.
Cheating science.
It's cheating.
How does that work?
Isn't that basically asking them to believe it on faith?
Well, the problem really becomes, that would mean the layers of soil that bury a fossil are bigger than whole years of soil. So every soil is catastrophically every fossil is catastrophically buried, except it doesn't show up in a layer format. That just doesn't make sense. It denies what we actually see.
Right.
All right. Does the Bible, and this is a really hard question, I know for a lot of Christians, but try and think this through with me. Be a little open-minded. Be willing to just go where God leads you on this. Does the Bible leave room for the possibility that dinosaurs died out before humans lived on the earth?
Yes. No.
Listen to the question again. Don't answer too fast. Does the Bible leave room, wiggle room you could call it, for the dinosaurs to lived and then died out before humans existed?
No. They could have lived in one day. Just died out.
Yeah.
Because, wait, hold on.
Think about it.
Because the beasts were good. Wait, were man and beast created on the same day? Or?
Day 6.
Then
That's Saturday.
Yes.
Not really, because we talked about how there wasn't death before sin.
Ah, good question. So if it was lived before man, yeah, you could try and make that argument. And then there's people who are like, every day of creation is 1,000 years long. And I don't really think that makes any real sense. But you're right. If the Bible says death didn't exist, then they couldn't have died out before humans got there, because the Bible says death entered the world through man. And so they would have all had to die once, man existed, if they all died out in a catastrophic event before human history really got its takeoff, it still would have overlapped with humanity. It still would overlap. Even if by the teeniest, tiniest margin, it still would have overlapped. But that doesn't go along with everything else. To say that they died in some huge extinction event would basically include a lot more than dinosaurs. It would also mean that all of them lived, grew, died within like a portion of a day. That doesn't make any sense though when you consider all the different age dinosaurs we see buried. We see infants, we see eggs, we see adolescents, we see adults, we see the full age spectrum. All that in a day?
Yeah, fruit flies.
It doesn't line up.
They're just giant fruit flies.
That would be the freakiest thing in the world. To watch a reptile that gets like 10 feet taller as it walks from this side of the room to that side of the room. And then like its footprints in the sand, you'd see them. And like they'd be these little speck-sized footprints and then they'd just be these puddles as they got to the side. It's so weird. It was like God's last little joke.
The platypus and...
So this is the truth, guys. If you read the Bible and you take it at face value, there's no wiggle room on this. The dinosaurs lived alongside man. If you take the Bible at face value, they, like every other animal, lived alongside man.
Could we have domesticated them?
Say again?
Could we have domesticated them?
Oh, gee, I hope so.
Because I read a book where they did that.
I watched
Like,
a
they
show
used
where they
them
did
to
that.
plow their fields.
There's actually another mosaic, and I didn't include it on the sheet because it's contested. It's not like as clear. There's this dinosaur, and it's an old painting, and everything in the painting is stylized with an art style, and so it's hard to tell if it's a dinosaur with a fin on its back or if it's just an alligator. Because of the art style, it could literally go either way. It's perspective problems. Everything in the picture, when it comes to flat view, looks fine. Anything it did in 3D, anything the artist did in 3D, doesn't look quite right. All the 3D stuff is off. And so it could be the back of the alligator, or it could be a fin going straight up. And you can't really tell. So I didn't include it. It's not like a firm confirmation of dinosaurs, but here's the trick. There's one adult on the back holding reins, and there's a bunch of other adults in front who have lassoed its neck, and they're all pulling it. So I don't know. It's either a human who's trying to ride an alligator, or it's a human trying to ride a dinosaur. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
When you said about the alligator with a fin or whatever,
Sure.
it was born as a shark, then it became an alligator.
No, that doesn't make not that kind of fin. Anyways, it was like a sail.
Oh,
The big giant
oh,
fin.
it's a sailboat, then it was an alligator.
All right, Christian. Cody.
Christian joke.
About the Bible leaving room, it says right here, God created all animals, which would include dinosaurs, on the same day as the first humans.
Yeah, land animals. Yeah. Yeah, same day as humans. All right. So, final question before we head out of here. Okay. If you guys have some add-ins, now's the time to squeeze them in.
Marco Polo ran into dinosaurs as well.
He wrote about things in the sea that look like dinosaurs.
He was in a parade that had
Camera.
dinosaurs.
Industry.
He also
Sorry?
mentioned, he was in a parade that had dinosaurs.
Oh,
He
weird.
also mentioned.
So he talks about them as domesticated.
He also mentioned that there's a royal dragon feeder.
Oh,
nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
What? So according to the Bible, then did the you know, like the whole thing where they died, like, you know,
Asteroid,
Exactly.
creating giant clouds covering
Exactly.
the earth, knocking everything out of.
exactly. Does
Yeah.
did that just not happen then?
Basically.
So then how did they
We
die?
don't
Because-
actually see evidence of a crater anywhere on the earth big enough to create a worldwide cataclysmic event.
But I heard
We see
that they
plenty of
were-
big craters.
that the-
We know about plenty of big asteroids.
But like it happened like so fast, like all of them died so fast that they were doing something like even like one was like giving a birth to a baby and like in the middle.
It would have to be something that speed because we actually do have fossils of fish eating fish. Think about that for a second. We have fossils where, and there's multiple. It's not even just one. That's the cool part. It's literally a fish with a small fish half in, half out of its mouth. Multiple of that. So yeah, they had to get buried like that. Because honestly, if I'm like fearing for my life, I ain't gonna keep eating dinner.
Exactly. Yeah.
That ain't gonna keep happening. I'm gonna spit that out and try and swim faster than the wave of death. But if you're buried instantaneously under a wall of mud, then you're not gonna get a chance to spit it out. You're stuck. Now the mud's holding it in your mouth. And then you get fossilized like that. Yeah.
If there was an asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, then how did it not kill everything else?
It's a great question. And this comes down to a similar question that I think it applies to the Christian timeline as well. Same question. Why are dinosaurs extinct now and not everything else that was on the ark too? Well, think about it logically. We talked about last week how after a worldwide flood, there'd probably be an ice age that follows. Estimations based on computer models say it would take about 200 years to get to its peak and another 200 years to fall away and the Earth kind of get back to its equilibrium that we have now. And this would also explain how the Earth was probably a heck of a lot different pre-flood than it is now. The transition from pre-flood weather patterns, pre-flood continental weather systems to modern day would be explained by an ice age. Because as far as we know, everything pre-flood was temperate, was nice, was all same temperature whole planet over. Now we've got ice caps. And the further north you go, or the further south you go from the equator, it just keeps getting colder and colder and colder. Those are all the kinds of things you'd see as a remnant of an ice age. Most reptiles would not do well in an ice age unless they were near the equator. So what we find interesting is the accounts of dinosaurs by humans is more prevalent around the equator. That makes sense! If all the dinosaurs split off the arc and they go in most every direction, and then after they get where they're going, because remember the ice age would ramp over 200 years, then the ones that went too far north, too far south, they die.
What about the ones in Australia?
So then you would start to see in these places that are perpetually warmer that would escape an ice age well, their dinosaurs would survive better. And so we see a lot of the dinosaur accounts coming from places like India and around India, where they have a very jungly, very warm, very moist climate, which would have been most similar to the pre-flood climate. Makes good sense. Around Pompeii, around that Middle East, Northern Africa area, those places we see a lot of dinosaur accounts as well. So it makes sense. You don't see as many up crazy north, down crazy south. You see them mostly in the equatorial area. That's not a word, don't use that. Equatorial. It's a very, very technical term. Equatorial?
That's what I was going to say. That's what it would be.
There was a word like it. I was just trying to find it. Anyways, so yeah, it's a great question. I think we need to answer it as much as secular scientists need to answer it. Why does an asteroid that knocks out the sun kill only dinosaurs? Leading theory, cold-blooded, bigger than other cold-blooded animals, so they are more affected by temperature shifts, which is kind of the same answer we have. It's not that different.
Then why would smaller dinosaurs have died out than those of cold-blooded reptiles we have today?
Well,
Dinosaurs that are tiny versus reptiles that are tiny that aren't dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, no answer there. No real answer there.
Dragon is pretty big.
Yeah, and this is kind of the point. Dinosaurs have a lot of other peculiar differences from modern-day reptiles that aren't like noticeable to us who are uneducated on those differences. I don't know if you guys saw last week the list or that really ridiculous sciencey question on the screen today during the Kahoot. The differences are like very, upper level science. They are not things you're going to notice just by looking at a picture of a Komodo dragon and a picture of a similarly sized dinosaur. These are very special differences. And so it's tricky to even figure out why would there be differences in survivability? What are the requirements for this that aren't required for that? I don't honestly know. But yeah, as far as the big ones go, I think that one kind of answers itself. That one does make a ton of sense. Smaller ones, I don't know. That one's a little trickier. All right, final question. Why does the timeline of humans and dinosaurs matter? Does it even matter if humans and dinosaurs coexisted? Shared the Earth around the same time? Is this even important? Yeah.
Well, if they didn't, it proved like the Bible, part of the Bible wrong.
Okay, good answer. Yeah.
It's the first thing that atheists go to try and stump you.
Exactly. If we start to memorize the Bible's timeline and leave dinosaurs out of that timeline, then all someone who wants to defeat your Christianity has to do is bring up dinosaurs. That's all they have to do. If your timeline doesn't involve them, then suddenly you kind of look like an idiot. You look like, man, I forgot science. I knew there was a problem with Christianity. Darn. That's honestly what it looks like. And so we need to look into science. We need to figure out, are there things I haven't thought about yet? Are there parts of my faith I haven't explored? Are there things about the Bible I haven't tried to learn about? And then we need to learn about those things. Not only so we can defend our faith as it gets attacked, but also, as we talked about last week, when we're sharing with someone and they want to believe, but there's an area of science that keeps them from it. There's an area of science that keeps them going, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can trust God, because what about this? What about this? Then we're going to have an answer. We're going to know truth that we can give them in love that's going to open that door and allow them to walk through it and get closer to God. Find Him and have that relationship with Him. All right, last thing.
It's kind of like what they said, but if you can prove that evolution actually happened, you can prove that it was the Big Bang. Like,
You can just kind of keep going.
yeah, and then there is no God, and if there's no God, there's no Christian.
One of the things that's hard to remember, I know, because there's so many numbers. Does anyone know how long secular science says humankind has been on the earth in its present form? How long have humans been alive? Not what they're calling cavemen, not proto-humans, but modern day Homo sapiens. Yeah.
I think it was 8 million or something.
8 million. Not quite that.
Maybe it was smaller.
It's a smaller number. 8,000? No, that's a little close to ours. We're saying 6,000. Yeah.
Well, now I'm thinking that my answer is probably wrong.
Oh, it's okay.
Around
Just guess.
6,000, 7,000.
No, that's us again. Yeah.
2 million?
Nope, shorter. It's 100,000. Did you really say it?
You said 8 cubits.
No, you. Well, here's the kind of flip-floppy issue on this. If humanity's been around for 100,000 years, then that means the Bible's just flat out lying. Because the Bible says that Adam was the first man. The Bible gives you the number of years from us to Adam. And so if the Bible says Adam's the first man and he lived 6,021 years ago, and evolution is proven or believed to be proven, then they're saying that humanity's been around 100,000 years. That would just flat out mean the Bible lies to you.
And you don't believe in like the 1,000 days could be one day.
It still wouldn't add up because there's only 6 days up to man. It's only 6,000 extra years, so you still wouldn't get there. You still wouldn't get that 100,000. You'd only get an extra 1,000. So there's so many problems with that. But then this is the cool flip side. Do the math. It isn't possible that humanity has been alive 100,000 years. If fossils are always forming at a constant deposit rate, like they suggest, not catastrophic rates like Christian scientists are suggesting, creation scientists are suggesting, then that means we are missing a lot of fossils. A lot of fossils. Because you would have to have a population on the whole planet for the bulk of those 100,000 years, less than 1 million people. Less than 1 million people over the bulk of those 100,000 years, or else we're way short on fossils. We should have a ton more human remains. And they just aren't there. We keep digging and we keep digging and we keep digging, and we're not finding the number of human fossils that should exist.
Isn't that possible though? Like during the Dark Ages, we had less than.
On the planet, though.
That's what I'm saying.
We're talking about countries that we know had hundreds of thousands of people per country. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. It would have to be like every village on the planet was like 10 people, and there's only like, one village per country or something. It's very small numbers if you start looking at the fossilization rates. So, what really does add up? The Bible and evidence from geology, paleontology, biology, archaeology, and history confirm that dinosaurs lived at the same time as humans. Don't believe it? Do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Look into it. Dig something up. All right, we're going to pray and get out of here. I love you guys. Feel free to take these. I don't want to see them in the trash. I don't want to see them lying around in the room. When we leave, put them right here or keep them. Those are your two options. All right, let's pray. Lord, I ask that you would continue to bless each and every person here that's digging into your word, that's digging into history and digging into science. And Lord, just bless those efforts. Reveal the truth to them. Help us to be cemented in our faith. Help us to be strengthened in it and not rocked when someone starts quoting half-truths and unconfirmed facts. Lord, we know that your word is true. You've confirmed it to us. You've proven it over and over again in your prophecies coming true. You've confirmed it over and over again in revealing scientific fact in your word before we, quote unquote, discovered it. You're amazing, Lord. Your word is amazing. And so I just ask, Lord, that as we continue this study in the next 2 weeks, that you would help us to draw close to you in all of this and not just the trivial knowledge about science. That knowing that about science will remove blockades, will remove barricades, and we'll just get to be closer to you as a result. We ask all this in your name.